Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is still Rise and Shine, and we're coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. Of course, several things are happening in the world, and the conversation is getting heated. For over 2 years now, Russia has been invading Ukraine, attempting to take over some parts of its sovereignty. But of course, we've seen the Western world also support Ukraine to a very, very large extent. Just to give a background to some of the things that we're about to talk about, after almost 100 years since the last Russian Revolution, the Wagner Rebellion, which happened on the 24th of June, is raising a big question in the minds of people. Is there going to be another revolution to be experienced in Russia? Of course, Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of Wagner Group, a privately run paramilitary outfit used pivotally by the Russian President Vladimir Putin in the invasion of Ukraine since February 2021. Over the weekend, on the 24th of June, in response to an allegation of opening fire on its mercenary, the Wagner boss moved a march staged in one of the very pivotal cities in Ukraine, which in Russia, I beg your pardon, which is used as a corridor to the invasion of Ukraine. Of course, he staged a move as a response to this particular opening of fire. These are the conversations we want to have this morning. Let's look at how the response by the Wagner Group is going to be affecting Russia, affecting Vladimir Putin's position as president also of the country. To have this discussion with us this morning is no other than attorney Asuko Mendy, Asuko Esquire, Archibong Esquire, I beg your pardon. Of course, he is U.S. barred international attorney at law. Also has a broadcasting background. In 2014, he formed the now deregistered Nigeria for Democracy NFD party. Of course, he was also the presidential candidate for the 2019 general elections. Of course, with a great background in international related matters. That is why we are having Attorney Asuko Mendy on the show this morning to have this conversation with us. Good morning and good to have you on the show.
Thank you so very much, Ria. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Janice. It's such a pleasure to be here again.
You're welcome. Quite interesting conversations, we must say. 24th of, is it 24th now?
24th of June,
24th of June, you know, marked a turning point for the Russian troop, and of course for the President Vladimir Putin as well. The invasion of the Wagner Group. And when we even look at the story behind the Wagner Group, it's more like this was the group, you know, that formed the front line of Putin's armies, you know, on the invasion in Ukraine. But when we see that there is a fire back now at Putin, it calls for a lot of worry. It's been conversations on, you know, the front lines in recent times. What was the reason behind this backfiring? What was the reason behind the Wagner invasion of Russia? You know, and where does this leave Putin as well?
Yeah, talking about the insurrection by Wagner. When you want to talk about Wagner Group, you have to go back a little bit and understand what the group is all about. To understand what the group is all about, you also have to go back to the Iraq War. In the Iraq War, the United States used what was called the private military contractors. Blackwater was one of them. Blackwater was first and foremost a security guard to guard the bases before it metamorphosed into a fighting force of retired special forces men from the US military and as well as the British military. And Blackwater was one of the meanest private military contractors you could ever think about. They committed a lot of atrocities. In fact, they were prosecuted, and some members of the US military force were supposed to be prosecuted, but the United States has not signed any agreement that would release their military personnel to be prosecuted. So Blackwater members were prosecuted for murder, for torture, for degrading acts. Now comes of course, the private military contractors of Wagner Group. The Wagner Group was meant to guard security perimeters for different operations overseas. And it actually, just like Blackwater, metamorphosed into a fighting force. But you see, because Russia wanted to hide its hand, and show some project some military force. It didn't rein in the Wagner Group. It allowed it to operate. And the Wagner Group operated in Syria. It started off with guarding the bases for Russia, where it had its military planes there. But then it metamorphosed into a fighting force in Syria and opposed the deposition of the Syrian president, Assad. It was very effective. It then moved from Syria to Libya. It moved to Sudan. It moved to Mali. It's gone even as far as Sierra Leone and Senegal. It has footprints in Nigeria. It moved to Angola, to Malawi, to Tanzania, to Madagascar, to Mozambique. It's all over Africa. It's even in Venezuela. It's also in United Arab Emirates. So the Wagner Group is all over the world, so to speak. And it's not merely a military fighting force. It's also an economic and financial company. It has one of the biggest gold refining organizations in Africa. It's a mining company as well. It's also into oil. It's guarding some of the biggest oil reserves in Libya. It also has a footprint in the oil reserves in Sudan. So this is a very powerful organization that has been built by Yevgeny Prigozhin. To take it down will be very difficult, and it will affect Russia extremely. When you look at the power of Yevgeny Prigozhin, it's bound to happen that he would not want to be under the Ministry of Defense. You're talking of a man that has over 75,000 troops on the continent of Africa and Venezuela and in Asia. And also has 25,000 troops fighting in Ukraine. Remember, Russia has not fought a war. Russia is not a warring country. Unlike America, unlike Britain, unlike France, which has fought wars in Libya, in Iraq, in Syria. So they've not had their army tested. But the Wagner Group has been tested heavily. That's why they are such an effective fighting force in Ukraine. The challenge here is that because it was becoming too powerful on the subcontinent of Asia and in Ukraine and in Russia, the Minister of Defense and the Chief of General Staff, Shoigu, Minister of Defense Valery Gerasimov, both of them wanted to rein in the Wagner Group because it was becoming more powerful than the military. But to rein it in, they have to absorb the fighting force of the Wagner Group. And this would have taken away the power of Prigozhin. And Prigozhin did not like that. Because
there's also allegations of killings of his army personnel.
Well, he made those allegations and the army denied those allegations. He said they were bombed. He also made the allegations that his flanks were left open after he moved into Bakhmut and occupied some territory. The army was supposed to come and pacify the land while he proceeded, but they abandoned him by retreating. He's made allegations that the army is not supporting him militarily in terms of armament. But you see, if you give him more armaments, he becomes even more powerful than the Russian army. Right now, he's more powerful than many units of the Russian army. And that was the reason he decided to go back to the headquarters of the southeast in Russia, Rostov-on-Don, and demand to speak with the defense minister and the chief of general staff, Shoigu Gerasimov, as well. And he was denied that request. And he made the threat of marching on to Moscow, which was unfortunate. He went as far as, he went beyond Vereshnev and some reckoning as close as 200 miles from Moscow. Some would say that he showed that Putin is not that powerful. It's very difficult. That was a very difficult situation which Lukashenko actually stepped in to broker peace. You don't have to be so powerful to broker peace. You just have to have the ears of both parties. And this is an excellent thing that Lukashenko did. Because in the end, Putin had what is called a win-win situation here. He retained power and he got rid of Prigozhin. Now,
at least temporarily, I must say. Don't you think it's a temporary putting away of Prigozhin's energy?
There is no one that is going to take power from Putin. Let me explain it this way, because the West and the rest of the world do understand this. What happened in Libya would be child's play if Putin were to lose power. In Libya, first, Gaddafi was pacifying and maintaining control of the different groups that were the warring sections in Libya. Immediately he was killed, Libya has not been at peace. All the weapons came all the way down to Nigeria and fed into the insurgency in the northeastern part of Nigeria, Boko Haram. There's been no peace in Mali. There's been no peace in Niger. There's been no peace in Cote d'Ivoire. There's been no peace in Libya. There's generally been no peace even in some parts of Egypt. Of course, you can see there's been no peace in Sudan. From one man being taken out who was able to suppress the different regions. We go further back to Iraq, the killing of Saddam Hussein. After the killing of Saddam Hussein came about Islamic State, the warring and the killing, and still there's been no peace in Iraq till today. And it's exported ISIS to the rest of the world. So when you look at a country like Russia, which has 11 time zones, Nigeria, as big as it is, does not even cover one time zone. The United States has only 3 time zones. Russia has 11. And they are made up of different ethnic groups and different religions. Understand, they are Christians, they are agnostics, they are Muslims, they are Hindus over there in Russia. And he's able to pacify and maintain control over all of these ethnic groups. And Russia has the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons, bigger than all the nuclear weapons of the Western countries combined. It has 4,400. US has about 3,200. Britain has about 290. France has about 220. You can't even come close. And you remove a man that is able to pacify all of these disparate groups and is able to control nuclear weapons that can destroy the world. You're going to end up having a war that that ends immediately.
That's
okay, but
now.
yeah, Vladimir Putin has led Russia for 23 years. And are we looking at the fact that in all of this, the conversation is tilting to the fact that Prigozhin might have a political ambition somewhere, you know, he's talking away, and this might be giving reason to his attempted move to take over and resist the invasion that he alleges that his mercenary experienced. But the question is whether or not this particular insurgency or rebellion by Prigozhin was successful. Do you think that this is in any way going to inform, we believe it's going to alert Vladimir Putin in some way? You have said some Western nations are even saying, okay, maybe Putin is not as powerful as he thought. But going forward, do you think that this is going to have a dent or affect even the mental structure of Putin's political ambition going forward?
I didn't say he's not as powerful. I said some may have said he's not as powerful, but he is still the most powerful man in Russia, Vladimir Putin. There's just no other person that's powerful as he is. Why did Wagner Group, Prigozhin, pull back? Remember, you have Chechnya. And you also have Lukashenko, who said, if you move forward, we are going to send troops. Chechnya already had 6,000 troops flown into Russia to help protect Putin. Putin has a presidential guard troop of 200,000 stationed in Moscow. There is just no way he could have gotten to Moscow. And Putin still controls the Air Force, which could have bombed him out of existence. But here is the challenge. If you fight him, you are eventually distracted from the war in Ukraine. Even if you defeat him, you've weakened yourself. So come to a reasonable agreement, let him go, postpone dealing with him for now. You still have people in Africa and different parts of the world, fighters who are trained, who can easily come back and bring about an insurrection in Russia and cause you serious headache. The country can implode. If you fight Prigozhin right now, let all those people remain employed. Even the foreign minister of Russia came out to say the operations in Africa, in Asia, and North America, being Venezuela, still remains. That everybody will be paid, and the fighters, and reassured the governments in Africa and in Venezuela that they will not withdraw those troops. Now, to say that Putin is weakened, no. he's actually come out stronger in this. The fact that he's been tested does not mean that he's been weakened.
I think it brings us to the conversation of, if he had all of these things, all of these arsenals at his disposal, why did he have to employ the services of Prigozhin and the Wagner Group?
Well, you remember the story of dividing the baby to show power and who owns the baby in the Bible. If you divide the baby into equal parts, then what? You've killed the baby. If you fight Prigozhin at that point, even if you defeat him, you've weakened yourself, and Ukraine is going to invade. Russia is, according to them, facing an existential fight for their survival in Ukraine. Why are they fighting in Ukraine? Because Ukraine was one of the prize jewels of the Union Soviet Socialist Republic of those days, and it's a very powerful country. So if you allow the Western world to take control of Ukraine, effectively you've checkmated Russia and you've boxed it in, and they don't want that. No matter the part of the aisle that a person stands, one can agree that it will make Russians uncomfortable to have a Ukraine with NATO missiles on the land pointed at Russia. That's precisely what the United States did not want to happen in Cuba in 1963, when it declared war and gave authority to its naval force to fire on any naval force that approaches Cuba. And Khrushchev had to withdraw his forces at that point. Now, some might say, if he had all those armaments, why didn't he deploy them? But there was no need if you can talk. Remember, it's better to talk and avoid a war that would distract you and take away from your power than to actually go into the war and fight and defeat the person, but it renders you powerless at the end of it. If he deploys all those armaments at his own citizens who are being misled, then what armaments will he deploy against Ukraine if they actually had to reach that level? You have to ask yourself that. In this point, who is still in power? Putin. Who still has command and control of the military? Putin. Who still has control of the nuclear weapons? Putin.
So you're trying to say that whether the Wagner Group is still in Russia or not, it doesn't have any effect on Russia?
They are going to be absorbed by the military. The agreement was, you go to Belarus, you can do your operations from Belarus. The Wagner members who actually want to be absorbed into the military sign a contract. They sign a contract with the military.
There's a very big argument that there's going to be a lot of high-ranking members of the Wagner Group that will not want to be signed into the Russian army. And that also is going to inform, so many, it's going to also inform a lot of problems even within the ranks.
Well, they are going to move to Belarus. Of course, they're going to move to Belarus and then move to different parts of the world where they have fighting force they can command. You can't go into war with senior command officers. They are just there to straighten out and develop policies and materialize ideas. So no matter how high-ranking the person is, they have the option of going to Belarus. Belarus has given them land to stay and continue to supervise their activities. What they are trying to do is to avoid the collapse of Wagner in different parts of the world, which will be catastrophic. Even the president of Central African Republic uses Wagner Group for his personal security detail. If it collapses, it's going to be a challenge to that country. So Russia now uses a hidden hand of Wagner to do a lot of things in Africa and checkmate the activities of the Western world. Remember that France pulled out of Mali for the singular reason that Russia entered into Mali. And Russia said, we are not in Mali. But it was the Wagner Group that entered into Mali.
But a lot of people believe that Wagner is a covering. It's more like a covering for Russia's presence in some of these African countries. But then let's shift away from Wagner's presence in Africa. Let's look at what this temporary revolt by Wagner, how is it going to direct the cause of the invasion of Ukraine now by Russia? There's a new twist to the fight, whether or not it escalated. What do you think is going to be the body language and the tone of this invasion of Ukraine by Russia going forward? Well,
it's not going to really affect it much. The Wagner Group was an effective fighting force. But if you really think about it, it was so difficult that for several months they tried to capture the city of Bakhmut and barely captured that city. But it didn't cover all the stretch of the land where the Russian forces are. The Ukrainian forces have not been able to penetrate any part of the Russian forces. So it means whether they are there or not, the Russian defenses have been maintained. Remember, whether we want to agree with it or not, we have to understand that Russia is fighting not just Ukraine. When we say it's fighting NATO, we have to really break it down. It's fighting France, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Poland, Britain, Canada, United States, Denmark. It's fighting all of these countries, and it's fighting them to a standstill. Every country in Europe has contributed either in personnel or in armament and in cash to the fight against Russia in Ukraine. And still Russia is moving ahead. The fight is very unfortunate, but it would have been better for them to talk, just like Putin spoke with Prigozhin through the Belarus president, and there was peace. Right now, to say that because the Wagner group has pulled out some of its forces, that is going to affect the fighting force of the Russian troops in the front line, naturally it will. But I see and I believe that the Russian forces would even fight harder and have more confidence now. Because remember, fighting is a matter of trust. If you don't trust the man to your left or the man to your right, you won't be able to fight. This continual drip of allegations by Prigozhin against the Russian military command was really affecting the fighting force out there, because they didn't trust the Wagner group. Now the Wagner group is out, and some will be absorbed into the military, and they will all have the same officers they will salute. You're going to see a more effective fighting force out there.
That's a very heavy twist, I must say.
Definitely. Yeah. I also know that a lot of people are also asking how this is going to affect Ukraine moving forward, especially for focus, weapons and troops as well. But I know this might just take a longer period of time in trying to explain. Our producer's telling us that our time is up right now on the show, but we really do sincerely thank you for always coming on the show to give us real good perspective to very critical issues, national issues, international issues. It's always a pleasure to talk to you on this.
I'm so pleased, and can I just say one thing here?
Please go ahead.
Just 1 second. Let me just appeal to the country of Nigeria, and most significantly to the new administration in Akwa Ibom State. The road coming to your station must be paid attention to, because this is an important segment of good governance. The media putting the word out there and educating the people. But if the road is challenged, then a lot of people will not be able to come here, especially the fact that Spectrum does employ a lot of people. And I'm not pushed in any direction by anyone to make this comment, but I'll just implore out there that the government should please help improve on this road.
Thank you so much, Anthony Asukwamendi Archibong Esquire, of course, U.S. BAD International Attorney at Law, and also one that has a very good broadcasting background. Thank you so much for your time with us.
Thanks, Janice. Thanks, Jenny.